Hello YouTube, welcome to my channel. One of my favorite content creators is Dr. Randomercam. He is, in my opinion, one of the smartest, funniest, and most talented content creators on YouTube. He recently put out a video called You're a Bad Person. The link is in the description. In the video, he seems to make 2 points. First, that calling someone a bad person is not rhetorically useful, and second, that there is not objectively such a thing as a bad person. Now, the first point I wholeheartedly agree with. Calling people good or bad is not rhetorically effective and seems kind of pointless. However, regarding the second claim, that good or bad are not categories that apply to human beings qua human beings, well, unfortunately, Dr. Randomercam stepped into my wheelhouse. In this video, I will first explain Dr. Randomercam's argument, show the errors in his argument, and then using metaphysics will demonstrate how one can come to an objective understanding of what good and bad mean in relation to personhood, and finally show how it is possible to say that all people are good in one sense of the word. Dr. Randomercam's argument is pretty simple and stated quite explicitly.
I've tried to get this through to people. There is no such thing as a bad person or a good person. At least these are useless concepts outside the realm of vacuous pathos, or whatever standards you set for yourself in your own internal self-value. And even there, it's not exactly necessary. You don't get to make that arbitration when it comes to anyone but yourself. A person is just a human being with a personality. And there's no such thing as a human being without a personality. It's like a body without a shape. It's the stuff of nonsense.
He says that a person is simply a human being with a personality and that all living humans have personalities. Therefore, as long as someone stays alive, that is, they continue to exist as a human being, they are a person. For Dr. Randomercam, fulfilling the qualifications of being a person is what makes someone a good person. Simplifying his argument to a syllogism, the argument boils down to something like this. All living human beings fulfill the conditions of personhood. Anyone that fulfills the conditions of personhood is a good person. Therefore, all living human beings are good persons. Thus, for Dr. Randomercam, it is pointless to talk about people being good or bad people, because anyone who is alive is a good person. And if they are not alive, then they have ceased to exist as persons, and so can't be bad persons. You can't be a bad person if you don't exist. However, Dr. Randomercam's argument is flawed because of a false premise. The second premise, anyone that fulfills the conditions for personhood is a good person. Consider a similar statement. Anyone that fulfills the conditions of being a comedian is a good comedian, or anyone that fulfills the conditions of being a guitar player is a good guitar player. Dr. Randomercam knows that there's a difference between someone who is technically a comedian and a good comedian, or someone who technically plays a guitar versus someone who plays a guitar with technique. In fact, in a separate video, Dr. Randomercam made this very same point.
There's a big difference, isn't there, Jordan, between wearing a painting on your face and wearing a cake on your face. Yeah? It's sort of like the difference between a symphony and a wolf whistle, between a sonnet and a cat call, isn't it? They're both expressions, but one is art for the sake of art, the other is basically a mating ritual. Just like a single molecule of water is not wet, a single note is not a melody, and a single word is not a poem, and 2 clumps of mascara and some lipstick is not a body painting. If you get to call that art, then the builder whistling at you from the rooftop gets to call that a rhapsody.
So just as a wolf whistle is not a symphony, and 2 clumps of mascara is not a body painting, simply having a pulse doesn't make you a good person. Now, Dr. Randomercam's error is easy to point out with examples like this, but it's actually a little more complicated to explain exactly what the error is. The error deals with what it means to be something, and in particular, to be a particular kind of thing. Let's consider a pencil. When I say the word pencil, I have a very particular image in my mind. Perhaps the image in your mind is the same as this, or perhaps you think of a different kind of pencil, like these ones. Despite these three things being different, we know that they are all pencils. You could probably give me a decent definition of a pencil, perhaps something along the lines of a writing implement that makes marks on a page that can be erasable. You also could probably tell me that these aren't pencils, but this presents a problem for us. Why are these pencils and these things not? Is it simply a function of language, or is there something else at work here? Clearly, a pencil doesn't have to be made of wood, and not all things that are made of wood are pencils. Furthermore, a pencil doesn't have to have an eraser, and not all things that have erasers are pencils. Finally, a pencil doesn't even have to be able to write on paper, and not everything that can write on paper is a pencil. So what the heck is a pencil then? Let's compare the broken pencil to the pen. By all accounts, the pen fulfills our loose definition of a pencil better than the broken pencil. This particular pen has an eraser and so can make marks on a page that can be erasable. The broken pencil can't even make marks on a page. In that, it appears to be less of a pencil than the stick of butter. As Randomercam noted in another one of his videos, a stick of butter can make marks on a sheet of paper.
You write with butter by applying the butter to another surface, such as any given paper that will darken in tone and stay dark even after drying.
So why is a broken pencil a pencil, but a pen or a stick of butter are not? The answer is that even though we define what a pencil is by what it does, in this case, make marks on a page, a particular object is not included or excluded from that category based on whether it actually does the definition of the category. A stick of butter is not more of a pencil than a broken pencil. The broken pencil is still a pencil, and the butter is still not a pencil. In other words, even if your cat barks, it is still a cat and not a dog, no matter how much hormone therapy it gets. So, if fulfilling the definition of a thing doesn't tell us what a thing is, what does fulfilling the definition of a thing tell us? Well, in this case, it tells us whether our pencil is broken or not. The reason the broken pencil can't write is because the tip of the pencil is broken. If the pencil were sharpened, it would again fulfill the definition of being a pencil. The pencil remains a pencil whether it's broken or not, but it is only able to act like a pencil when it is functioning. And moreover, there can be gradations in the action of a thing. A broken pencil doesn't write at all, but a sharp pencil writes better than a dull pencil. A dull pencil may be able to write, but it is not as good as a sharp pencil. Thus, we see that there is a distinction between being a particular kind of thing and being a good exemplar of that kind of thing. Now, there are two possible counterarguments that can be made here. The first is to say, sure, a sharp pencil may write better than a dull pencil, but both of them burn equally well. Therefore, a sharp pencil and a dull pencil are equally good at being firewood. And this is true, but we don't judge the quality of a pencil by how good it is at being something else. A sharp pencil is better than a dull pencil at being a pencil because it better fulfills the definition of being a pencil, even though they are in fact both pencils. The second counterargument is to say, sure, I grant your argument for pencils and for other kinds of human tools, but this only works because human tools have a definite purpose. This doesn't apply to things in the natural world. But this is actually not true. Consider any part of the human body. A broken arm is less good an arm than a working arm. We say that it is better to be healthy than not to be healthy. Why? Because healthy body parts are able to do the things that make those body parts what they are. The lungs of a smoker are still lungs, but they don't function as well as the lungs of a non-smoker. The healthy lungs are better at being lungs than the ones covered in tar. A nose that can't smell is still a nose, it's just not as good as a nose that can smell. Which brings us to persons. Are human beings different from everything else in existence, or is there a particular definition which by fulfilling one becomes a better person? The answer is yes. We call those things that make a good person virtues. We may disagree on what they are, but some historical examples are Prudence, Fortitude, Justice, and Temperance. You may have a different list, but it is probably similar. A person who is cowardly, stupid, corrupt, and licentious is still a person, but they are not as good at being a person as someone who is brave, wise, righteous, and temperate. And we know this to be true when we consider idioms like be the bigger person or he's a small person. When someone uses these, they aren't making a comment about physical size. The terms are linguistic acknowledgement that personhood itself can be bigger or smaller, or better or worse in certain individuals. But what is it about the virtues that make a person better or worse than another? How is being courageous or just for a person like being sharp for a pencil? Well, even though all pencils are pencils, whether they are sharp or not, the better a pencil is at being a pencil, the more like a pencil it becomes. Just as any animal begins from a single cell, and as it grows and develops, it more fully comes to resemble the animal that it is, so too, by fulfilling its own definition, does each thing become itself more fully. And since one can only exist as the kind of thing that one is, as one becomes oneself more fully, one exists more fully. Essentially, by being virtuous, you become more human, and by becoming more human, you bring more of yourself into existence. Conversely, by being vicious, you become a shadow of yourself, living a sort of half-existence. In this way, there is a relationship between virtue and being. It is good to exist, and the way we exist in the most full way is to live virtuously. And this brings us to my final point. As we saw above, there is a relationship between being and goodness. Being a good person simply means to exist more fully. Because all living human beings do in fact exist, there is a sense of the word good that does apply not just to all human beings, but in fact to everything that exists. Existence is itself good. But this raises a question. Why is existence good? Why is it better to exist than to not exist? Why is it that there is a relationship between being and goodness? The answer to this is that the source of being and goodness are the same. To exist is merely to partake in He who is pure existence, whose existence is not limited by being any kind of thing like pencils, butter, or even human beings, but who simply exists. Because God is the fullness of being, who does not exist as a particular kind of thing, but as being itself, and we were created by Him, our very nature desires to exist in a more actualized way. It is for this reason that we can say that being and goodness are one and the same. We were created to experience existence as fully as possible, and being virtuous helps us do that. Essentially, by being good human beings, we come more and more to resemble God Himself. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, I'm Benedict the 17th. Go with God.